When the Lord is truly speaking into your life, you won't feel torn apart on the inside. You won't be wrestling with endless doubts or constantly guessing every move. The voice of God is not a voice of chaos, and it is not a voice of fear. The voice of God is a voice of peace. That doesn't mean life will be easy or that every question will instantly be answered, but it does mean that in the middle of your waiting, in the middle of your wondering, there will be a calm assurance that cannot be explained in human terms. It is a peace that settles into the very core of your heart, and once you feel it, you can't mistake it for anything else. Some people chase signs in the clouds or visions in the night, thinking God must always confirm his will with something spectacular. But the greatest confirmation he often gives is not outside of you, it is inside of you. He whispers his will in that place where no one else can reach, in that quiet chamber of the heart, and when he does, the result is peace. Not a fragile peace that shatters when circumstances get rough, but a peace that holds steady when everything around you feels uncertain. The enemy thrives on confusion. He stirs up doubt, suspicion, and restlessness. He pushes you to move ahead when you're not ready, or to retreat in fear when God is telling you to trust. But the Spirit of God is altogether different. He leads you like a gentle shepherd, and though he may call you into the unknown, he does so with the assurance that he is with you. That is why Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you." The peace of God is not of this world. It cannot be purchased, it cannot be imitated, it cannot be taken away by the hand of man. When the Lord is confirming a relationship, his peace becomes the anchor. You may not have every answer, you may not see the whole path ahead, but there is something within you that says, this is right, this is safe, this is from him. And that peace does not waver even when storms arise. It is like walking across a bridge in the middle of a fierce wind. You may feel the storm pressing against you, but you know the bridge will hold because it was built to stand. God's peace is the structure that carries you through. Now you and I both know that feelings can deceive, infatuation can cloud judgment, emotions rise and fall like waves on the sea, but God's peace is not like emotion. It is steady, constant, and sure. That is why the Apostle Paul said, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts." In other words, let his peace be the umpire, the judge, the one that calls the shots when you don't know what to do. If you step in a direction that isn't of him, that peace will lift, and you will feel the absence of it. But when you walk in his will, that peace will remain, even when the road gets hard. I want you to understand this. Peace is not the absence of conflict around you. It is the presence of Christ within you. The world may swirl with noise and opposition, but the Spirit of God plants within you a calm that nothing can uproot. That is how he confirms his work. That is how he marks his hand upon a relationship, a calling, or a decision. You may not hear an audible voice from heaven, but you will feel the unshakable peace of God in your heart, and that is all the confirmation you need. And when you feel that peace, don't ignore it. Don't explain it away. Don't let doubt talk you out of what God is trying to seal upon your life. Trust it, rest in it, and know that his voice is marked by peace. When God brings two people together, it is never by accident. It is never simply because of chance or luck or coincidence. When the Lord is at work, he does not just connect two hearts, he aligns two lives. And that alignment is far deeper than liking the same things, enjoying the same hobbies, or sharing the same interests. It is a spiritual alignment, a harmony that reveals his hand. When God joins two people for his purpose, their values begin to reflect one another, their faith strengthens one another, and their callings move in step with one another in a way no human plan could ever design. You see, anyone can fall in love with surface similarities. Anyone can be drawn to appearance, charm, or even temporary excitement, but the kind of union that comes from God is built on something much deeper. It rests on foundations that storms cannot shake, foundations of faith, of character, of shared devotion to the Lord. When two lives are joined by Him, it becomes clear that they are moving in the same direction, toward the same goal, carrying the same vision in their hearts. And that is not something you can force or manufacture. That is the evidence of God's hand at work. Think of it this way: when two instruments are tuned to the same pitch, they resonate together, strike one string, and the other begins to hum in harmony. That is what spiritual alignment looks like in a God-ordained relationship. There is a harmony that goes beyond personality, beyond preference, beyond human reasoning. It is the Spirit of God drawing two lives into a divine rhythm, so that together they can reflect His glory more than they ever could alone. The enemy, of course, wants to distort this. He tries to pair people together based only on fleshly attraction, temporary thrill, or selfish desire. And when that happens, the foundation is weak, the alignment is missing, and sooner or later the cracks begin to show. But when God does the pairing, the fruit looks different. There is strength in unity, clarity in direction, and a sense of confirmation that both hearts recognize. It may not be perfect, because no relationship is free of struggle, but there will be a deep awareness that this is not just two people. It is God weaving together two stories for His glory. Now, alignment does not mean sameness. It does not mean two people are identical or that they never disagree. God often joins together people with different strengths, different gifts, different temperaments. But even in those differences, there is a unity of purpose. Like the parts of the body working together: eyes to see, hands to serve, feet to carry the load, God designs relationships so that together they can accomplish what neither could do alone. That is why Scripture says, "Two are better than one," because they have a good reward for their labor. This alignment shows up in the way faith is lived out. When God is in the center, prayer is not strange, worship is not uncomfortable, and the Word of God is not foreign territory. Instead, these things become the lifeblood of the relationship. Both lives begin to lean on Him, trust in Him, and seek Him together. And in that shared pursuit, love grows stronger, deeper, and more resilient. It is not just about companionship. It is about building a testimony of God's faithfulness together. There is also alignment in values. A heart that seeks purity will not be at peace with one that loves compromise. A life that is surrendered to Christ will not be fulfilled by walking alongside one that is running in the opposite direction. That is why the Lord in His wisdom unites those who are willing to honor Him so that their values hold steady under pressure. This alignment is not forced, it is natural because it flows from hearts that have both been shaped by the same Spirit. And finally, there is alignment in calling. God does not waste anything. He has a purpose for every person, and when He joins two together, that purpose becomes multiplied. One may encourage while the other leads. One may serve quietly while the other speaks boldly. But together, their callings begin to complement one another, creating a partnership that lifts up the name of Jesus in ways they never imagined. So when you are seeking God's confirmation, do not just look for feelings. Do not just look for appearances, look for alignment of faith, of values, of calling, because when God is the one bringing it together, you will see His hand in the harmony, and when you see that harmony, you can trust that He is the one writing the story. And that alignment is the unmistakable mark of His hand. One of the greatest truths we must learn in this life is that God's timing is never our timing, but it is always perfect. We live in a world that rushes. We live in a culture that demands instant answers, instant results, instant gratification. But God does not work on man's clock. He is not pressured by deadlines, he is not anxious about delays, and he is never caught off guard. His will moves according to his perfect wisdom, and when it comes to love, true love, it will always reflect his timing. So many people make the mistake of forcing what God has not yet released. They rush into relationships because they are tired of waiting, or because they fear being alone, or because everyone else seems to be moving ahead while they feel left behind. And in that rushing, they step outside of God's plan. They grab hold of something that looks good, but it may not be from Him. And later, when the cracks begin to show, when the foundation gives way, they wonder why it feels so heavy, why it feels so wrong. The answer is often simple: it was out of season. God's love story for your life will never arrive too early, and it will never come too late. His timing is not about your schedule, it is about His purpose. The Lord prepares hearts, He prepares circumstances, He prepares the path so that when He does bring two lives together, it is not chaos, it is not confusion, it is not turmoil, it is order, it is peace, it is confirmation. And the waiting, as hard as it may feel, is never wasted. Every delay in God's hands is preparation. Every season of silence is shaping you, strengthening you, and teaching you to depend on Him so that when His plan unfolds, you are ready to walk in it. Think about Abraham and Sarah. They were promised a son, but they grew tired of waiting, so they tried to make it happen their way, and it brought nothing but heartache. But when God's appointed time came, the promise was fulfilled, and Isaac was born. The difference between Ishmael and Isaac was timing. One was born of human impatience, the other of divine fulfillment. The same truth applies to love. What is born out of rushing may not carry the blessing of God, but what is born out of waiting for His timing carries His favor, His peace, and His purpose. You see, God does not just bring two people together for companionship. He brings them together for calling, and calling cannot be rushed. You may not understand why He is asking you to wait. You may feel forgotten. You may feel overlooked. But God knows what He is doing. He is preparing both hearts. He is shaping both lives. And when the time is right, He will cause your paths to cross in a way that only He could arrange. And when it happens, you will know it is Him, because the timing will be perfect. True love reflects that timing. It doesn't force its way in. It doesn't demand to have its own plan. It trusts, it waits, it leans on the Lord, and when God is in it, the timing confirms the truth of it. You may look back and realize, if it had happened any sooner, you wouldn't have been ready. If it had come any later, the moment would have passed. But God, in His wisdom, brought it about in the exact season it was meant to bloom. And let me say this to those who are waiting: don't let the enemy tell you that God has forgotten you. Don't let impatience push you into something that is not from Him. What God has prepared will come in its season. The same God who set the stars in the heavens and the seasons in their course is the same God who orders your steps. And just as the sun rises at the appointed time, just as the harvest comes in its due season, so will the love God has written for your life arrive right on time. And when it does, you won't have to strive to make it work. You won't have to hold it together with fear or doubt. You will rest in the knowledge that this is God's doing. The timing itself will bear witness, because His will never rushes, never delays, and never fails to arrive exactly when He intends. And true love, when it comes from Him, will always reflect that perfect timing. There is a reason God gives His children the gift of discernment. Life is full of choices, and not every door that opens is meant to be walked through. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. Not every opportunity is from the Lord. That is why discernment is not just helpful. It is essential. It is the guardrail that keeps you from drifting off the road. It is the quiet whisper of the Spirit of God warning you when something is wrong and affirming when something is right. Discernment is not suspicion, and it is not fear. Suspicion looks at people through eyes of doubt. Fear imagines danger in every corner, but discernment is different. It is the Spirit of God within you, helping you see what your natural eyes cannot. It is that gentle nudge in your heart that says, "This is not of me," or "This is the way, walk in it." And when you learn to listen to that voice, you avoid so much unnecessary heartache. So often, people walk into relationships or decisions because everything looks good on the outside. The words sound sweet, the doors look wide open, the path seems easy, but later they discover the truth. It was a trap, a counterfeit, something that glittered but was not gold. And many times, if they look back honestly, they will admit there was a small voice, a quiet check in the spirit that tried to warn them, but they ignored it because they wanted what they wanted. Discernment was speaking, but desire was louder. That is why it is so important to keep your heart tuned to God. When you walk closely with Him, His Spirit heightens your awareness. Suddenly, you begin to notice things you would have overlooked. Words that seemed harmless begin to ring hollow. Paths that seemed smooth suddenly feel uneasy. That is not paranoia. That is the Spirit of God whispering truth. He knows what you do not know. He sees what you cannot see. And He loves you too much to let you walk blindfolded into destruction. Discernment also confirms when something is right. It is not just about warnings, it is also about assurance. When the Lord is truly guiding you, there will be that inner peace, that holy confidence, that clarity that says, "This is of God." Even if the road is difficult, even if others doubt you, there will be a settled conviction in your heart that this is His will. That is the Spirit's way of saying, "You are safe here, keep going, I am with you." But discernment requires obedience. It is not enough to feel the Spirit's nudge. You must be willing to respond to it. Too many people hear His whisper but choose their own way, hoping it will work out anyway. But ignoring discernment is like ignoring the guardrail on a mountain road. It is there to protect you, it is there to keep you from falling into danger, and when you honor that guardrail, when you obey that inner prompting, you walk in safety. Now, discernment does not make you superior to others. It does not give you the right to judge harshly or to think more of yourself than you should. It is a gift of protection, not a weapon of pride. It keeps you humble because you know you are not relying on your own wisdom. You are leaning on God's wisdom. It keeps you prayerful because you realize you need His guidance every step of the way. And it keeps you dependent on His Spirit because you know without Him, you cannot tell the difference between the counterfeit and the true. So when it comes to relationships, when it comes to decisions, when it comes to the direction of your life, do not lean only on appearances. Do not trust only what your eyes can see. Ask for discernment. Listen for that whisper, and when He speaks, honor it, because the Spirit of God will never lead you into confusion, and He will never guide you into destruction. He will lead you into truth, into safety, into the fullness of God's will. And discernment is the guardrail that keeps your life on the path God has prepared. One of the greatest mistakes people make when it comes to relationships is believing that feelings are enough to sustain them. Emotions rise like waves and they fall just as quickly. Attraction may start the journey, excitement may fuel the beginning, but if that is all a relationship is built on, it will not stand the test of time. God never designed love to be grounded only in emotion. He designed it to be rooted in purpose, His purpose. And when He ordains a relationship, it is not just about how two people feel about each other. It is about how their lives can serve Him better together than apart. Feelings are wonderful. God gave us the capacity to feel, to love, to rejoice, to connect with one another in deep and powerful ways. But feelings alone cannot hold a marriage, they cannot sustain a family, and they cannot carry a calling. Feelings will tell you one day that you're on the mountaintop and the next day that you're in the valley. But God's purpose is steady. His calling is unshakable. And when a relationship is built on that purpose, it becomes something the storms of life cannot destroy. A God-ordained relationship carries the mark of mission. It's not just about finding comfort or companionship. It's about advancing the kingdom of God. When two people come together under His will, their gifts begin to complement each other, their faith begins to strengthen each other, and their work for the Lord multiplies in impact. One may have the voice to proclaim, while the other has the heart to intercede. One may step forward in leadership, while the other holds steady in encouragement. Together, they reveal Christ more fully than they ever could alone. You see, emotion says, I want to be with you because of how you make me feel. Purpose says, I want to walk with you because of how we can serve Him together. That is the difference between a relationship that fades with time and one that endures for a lifetime. When the Lord is the center, when His mission is the focus, then even in seasons when the feelings are weak, the purpose remains strong, and it is purpose that carries a couple through the valleys and into the victories. Think about the examples we see in Scripture. God often joined people together for reasons far bigger than themselves. Adam and Eve were not just companions. They were called to multiply and steward God's creation. Abraham and Sarah were not just husband and wife. They were chosen to bring forth a lineage that would bless all nations. Priscilla and Aquila in the New Testament were not just partners in trade. They were partners in ministry, teaching the Word of God and strengthening the early church. Each of these unions carried purpose, and that is why they carried weight in eternity. Now let me be clear. God does not ask you to deny emotion. He does not ask you to live coldly or without affection. But He does ask you not to be ruled by it, because when emotion is your foundation, you will build on sand. When purpose is your foundation, you will build on rock. And when the rains fall, and the floods rise, and the winds blow, that house will stand, not because of how strongly the couple felt in the moment, but because of how firmly they were rooted in God's design. Many today are chasing butterflies in their stomach instead of the Spirit of God in their lives. They are running after chemistry but neglecting calling. But the relationships that matter most are not the ones that make you feel good for a season. They are the ones that draw you closer to Christ and push you deeper into His mission. That is what it means for a relationship to be God-ordained. So when you ask the Lord for confirmation, don't just ask if this person makes you happy. Ask if together you can make Him known. Don't just ask if this person excites you. Ask if together you can glorify God. Because happiness will fade, excitement will cool, but purpose will endure. And when God writes your story, He will give you both emotion and purpose. But it is purpose that will keep you strong when the emotions rise and fall. And in the end, a God-ordained relationship proves itself not by the intensity of its feelings, but by the eternal impact of its purpose. There is a difference between hoping something is from God and knowing that it is. Hope can be shaky, uncertain, swayed by circumstances and emotions. But when the Lord confirms something, He doesn't leave His children in a fog of doubt. He gives a clarity that the world cannot provide, and He marks it with peace. That peace is more than a feeling. It is His seal of approval, His very signature upon the relationship. It is the quiet assurance in your heart that says, "This is of me." Peace from God cannot be counterfeited. The world offers imitations, temporary calm, fleeting happiness, shallow comfort. But those fade as soon as pressure comes. The peace of God endures in the storm. It holds steady when questions remain unanswered. It remains when everything around you shakes. That is why Scripture calls it a peace that passes all understanding. You can't explain it, you can't earn it, you can't manufacture it. It is the evidence that God Himself has placed His hand upon your life. Now, let me say this. The absence of conflict is not the same as the presence of peace. Some relationships are quiet on the surface, but unsettled underneath. You can feel the uneasiness deep down, even if nothing looks wrong outwardly. That is because peace is not about circumstances. It is about the Spirit of God ruling in your heart. And when He is truly confirming a relationship, there will be no inner war, no nagging unrest, no constant cloud of confusion. Instead, there will be a steady calm, a knowing that rests deeper than your understanding. Too many times people confuse excitement for peace. Excitement is loud, peace is quiet. Excitement comes and goes, peace remains. Excitement says, this feels right in the moment. Peace says, this is right even when the moment changes. And when God is at work, He doesn't leave you clinging to excitement alone. He grounds you with peace. That peace is His way of assuring you that you are not building on shifting sand but on solid rock. You see, the Spirit of God not only warns when something is wrong, He confirms when something is right. And that confirmation is not always through a voice in the clouds or a sign written across the sky. More often, it is through the deep quietness of peace in your heart. That peace is His amen, His approval, His way of saying, you can trust this. I am in this. And when you have that, you don't have to keep asking 1,000 times because He has already settled the matter within you. Think of how the disciples must have felt when the risen Christ appeared to them. The very first words He spoke were, "Peace be unto you." He knew they were troubled, He knew they were fearful, but His presence brought peace, and that is what He still does today. When He steps into a relationship, when He marks it with His will, His peace settles the fears, quiets the doubts, and assures you of His presence. It is His seal that says, "This belongs to me." That is why the Apostle Paul instructed, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts." That word, rule, means to act like an umpire, to make the call, to settle the decision. When you are uncertain, when you are weighing whether something is from God or not, let His peace decide. If peace remains, that is His seal. If peace is missing, that is His warning, because God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So if you are seeking His will in a relationship, don't only ask yourself, does this make me happy? Ask yourself, does this bring me peace? Happiness can be deceiving, but peace is telling. And when the Lord confirms it, you won't just hope you'll know. That peace in your heart is His signature, His way of saying, "This is my work, and I am with you." And peace is God's seal of approval. Friend, remember, God's voice is peace, His hand is alignment, His timing is perfect, His Spirit is your guardrail, His purpose is greater than emotion, and His seal is peace in your heart. If this message has spoken to you today, let it strengthen your faith and guide your steps. I'd love for you to be part of this journey as we keep sharing God's truth together. So go ahead, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs encouragement. Until next time, may God's peace rule in your heart. The thunder did not merely sound that night, it shook the earth beneath them, as though the very sky had chosen to declare its power. Each crash rolled through the air with such force that the walls seemed to tremble. Lightning flared sudden and fierce, cutting through the darkness like a sword. In that brief illumination, every fear lay bare. She flinched at the brilliance of it, her hands tightening around the shawl she still held close. He noticed the quick rise and fall of her breath, and though he himself was no stranger to storms, even he felt the uneasy thrill that each flash and rumble carried. It was in that shared tension, that involuntary vulnerability, where the true closeness began. He did not mock her fear nor dismiss it as trivial. Instead, he spoke softly, as if his voice could outmatch the thunder. A jest, light but kind, fell from his lips, an observation that even the sky seemed too restless to sleep tonight. She laughed, though nervously, and the sound of it softened the storm for him as well. Their fear, it seemed, was lessened when divided between two. They began to speak more freely, the storm granting them reason to linger. She confessed how the lightning had always unsettled her, how, as a child, she would hide beneath the covers and count the seconds between the flash and the roar. He smiled at the memory, admitting that he too had once done the same, though he had long since pretended otherwise. There was comfort in such honesty, for neither sought to appear braver than they were. In revealing their unease, they allowed each other the liberty to be human, imperfect, and sincere. The moments between the thunder grew into spaces where words filled the air. He told her stories of journeys made on quieter evenings, of paths traveled under stars instead of storms. She, in turn, spoke of books that had kept her company, of the way a story could lift her from even the darkest night. And every time the thunder cracked, every time lightning turned night into day, they paused, not in silence, but in a glance, a laugh, an unspoken reassurance that they were together in that moment. There was something striking in the simplicity of it. Fear had brought them to honesty faster than politeness ever could. They did not speak as strangers measuring their words with caution. They spoke as companions bound by circumstance, seeking comfort in each other's presence. Their laughter was not forced but genuine, born from the absurdity of feeling so exposed to the sky's rage and yet finding humor in it. Each smile exchanged was a quiet acknowledgement. The storm may roar outside, but here, within these walls, there is safety. He found himself drawn not only to her courage in the face of fear, but also to the gentleness with which she admitted it. She did not seek to disguise her trembling hands, nor pretend she was unmoved. Instead, she allowed him to see her as she was, fragile in one moment, strong in the next, and he, who had arrived weary and resigned, discovered a renewed warmth in offering his steadiness when she faltered, and receiving hers when the storm startled him in return. The night pressed on, the storm showing no sign of relenting, but time seemed altered in their company. Minutes stretched and folded, shaped by the rhythm of thunder and the melody of conversation. What had begun as an inconvenience became a passage into closeness. She no longer recoiled as sharply at each crash, for his words followed quickly after, steadying her thoughts. He no longer felt the weight of the storm as oppressive, for her laughter, even when tinged with fear, carried a lightness that no thunder could shake. And so, in that narrow refuge, while the sky declared its unrest, two hearts found calm. Fear, when shared, became less of a burden and more of a bond, and laughter, even against the backdrop of the storm's fury, became proof that comfort could be found in the most unlikely of places. And that was the beginning of their courage. The storm outside had no mercy, its fury drumming against the streets as though determined to drown out every thought. Yet within the fragile shelter there was a growing quiet, the kind of quiet that does not depend upon silence but upon trust. Words had begun to flow between them, first cautious, then steady, until they found themselves sharing more than passing remarks. It seemed that the violence of the night, instead of keeping them apart, urged them into confessions neither had planned. She spoke first, her voice soft but certain, carrying the weight of truths she rarely admitted aloud. She told of her longing to see more of the world, of dreams left waiting because duty and expectation often held her close to home. Her eyes flickered between the shadows and the light of the storm, as though the sky itself dared her to reveal more. He listened with an attentiveness that steadied her. When she paused, uncertain if she had said too much, he encouraged her with a glance, one that assured her that her words were safe in the storm's embrace. He answered with a story of his own, not boastful, not rehearsed, but honest. He told her of the weariness he sometimes felt, the quiet battles he fought against disappointments that no one else could see. He admitted that even as he traveled, there were moments when he felt stranded in spirit, unsure of where he truly belonged. The thunder punctuated his words, and the lightning revealed the sincerity etched upon his face. She did not turn away. Instead, she met his openness with a warmth that carried no judgment, only understanding. And so it went. One story invited another, each revealing a piece of their hidden selves. He discovered in her a courage she did not name but showed in every word, a courage to endure restlessness without bitterness, to carry the weight of expectation without surrendering her spirit. She, in turn, discovered in him a tenderness that did not need to be proclaimed, for it lived in the way he listened, in the careful honesty of his speech. It was strange, almost enchanting, how quickly the night transformed. Outside, the storm's rage continued unbroken, yet inside, it gave them the rare gift of time unmeasured. The minutes that might have been spent in unease became instead a tapestry of shared hopes and fears. Their stories wound together like threads in the same cloth, not identical, but deeply familiar, as though they had been cut from the same fabric of longing and persistence. There were moments when they laughed, surprised to find humor in their own struggles, grateful to share it with someone who understood. And there were moments when their voices softened, when the weight of what they revealed seemed too great to carry alone, until the other's presence made it lighter. Each word seemed to deepen their connection, not with grand declarations, but with the simple recognition that they were no longer entirely alone in the paths they had walked. The storm grew louder still, rattling the very frame of the building around them, but they hardly noticed any more. What once had been a source of fear became the backdrop to something far stronger. The thunder marked the rhythm of their exchange. The lightning illuminated faces now softened by trust. What mattered was not the storm's persistence, but the rare ease with which they spoke, as though they had known each other for far longer than the hours allowed. They did not say so, but both felt it, the sense of having stumbled upon something remarkable. It was not merely that their stories resembled each other's, though they did. It was that in hearing the other's voice, each found a reflection of themselves, softened by empathy and strengthened by hope. Their dreams, once fragile when spoken in solitude, gained substance when spoken together. Their struggles, once heavy, seemed to weigh less when shared in that narrow space on that extraordinary night. And though the storm raged on, they had discovered something more enduring than the tempest outside, the quiet certainty that two strangers drawn together by chance might find in one another the understanding they had long sought. And that was the beginning of their truth. The storm did not weaken as the hours stretched on. Instead, it gathered a rhythm, as though determined to prove its command over the night. The thunder rolled endlessly, and the lightning cut across the sky with sudden brilliance, yet within the shelter their attention had begun to shift. It was no longer the violence outside that held them, but the gentleness revealed in each other's presence. He found himself watching her in the quiet intervals between thunder, observing not only the softness of her features but the resilience that lingered in her expression. She had admitted her unease, yet she faced every new crash of the storm with a dignity that impressed him. She trembled at times, yes, but it was the kind of trembling that did not diminish her. It revealed her humanity and, in turn, her courage. For even in fear, she chose to stay present, to meet the storm with laughter, with conversation, with a heart open enough to share her dreams. That choice, he realized, was strength of a rare kind. She, too, felt her thoughts drawn to him in ways she had not expected. The storm had given her reason to lean upon his steadiness, but what lingered was more than gratitude. She admired the kindness with which he spoke, the patience in his listening, the way he never hurried her words but let them find their own place. Even in the dim light, she could see the honesty in his eyes, a sincerity that was neither rehearsed nor intended to impress. It was simply who he was, and that, to her, was far more remarkable than any attempt at grandeur. Admiration often begins quietly, almost unnoticed, until it grows too strong to be ignored. So it was with them. She watched the way he laughed, not loudly, but warmly, as though he meant it. He noticed the way she carried herself even in uncertainty, a mixture of grace and authenticity that seemed rarer with every passing moment. Each thunderclap only deepened their awareness of each other, for each glance exchanged under the sudden light of the storm felt like a secret moment set apart from the rest of the world. There was no need for declarations, no sudden words of affection. Their admiration unfolded naturally, like a flame that burns steady rather than fierce. He admired the way she spoke of her family, the quiet devotion hidden in her tone. She admired the way he described his travels, not with arrogance, but with humility, as though every place he had seen was a lesson rather than a conquest. They were discovering, piece by piece, that strength is not always found in bold gestures, but often in the simple kindness of being fully present with another. The storm outside roared on, but they had begun to hear it differently. It no longer sounded like a threat, but a rhythm that underscored the intimacy growing between them. Each flash of lightning revealed expressions they could not conceal. The lingering smile, the softened gaze, the quiet wonder at being seen, truly seen, by someone who only hours ago had been a stranger. There was something extraordinary in that recognition, and it filled the narrow shelter with a warmth no storm could extinguish. He thought of how rare it was to meet someone whose company made time slip unnoticed, whose presence softened the edges of fear. She thought of how strange and yet how natural it felt to trust him, to admire the steadiness that anchored her when the night felt most unsteady. Neither spoke these thoughts aloud, for they did not need to. The admiration between them was woven into every pause, every glance, every word chosen with care. And so the storm, relentless and unyielding, became their backdrop, a stage upon which admiration took root. They had not sought it, had not prepared for it, and yet it was undeniable. In the glow of lightning and the echo of thunder, they saw in each other what so many spend years searching for: the union of strength and kindness, courage and gentleness, woven together in a way that invited respect, and perhaps something more. And that was the beginning of their wonder. The hours slipped by with a strange quietness, though the storm itself showed no mercy. Rain still battered the streets, thunder still shook the ground, and lightning still tore open the sky with its brilliance, yet time within that narrow shelter seemed to take on a rhythm of its own. What was first endured as inconvenience soon became something unexpected, almost treasured. Neither of them had imagined they would remain there so long, but as the storm refused to pass, it offered them a gift far greater than safety. It offered time. At first, they waited with a kind of restless hope, glancing toward the streets as though the rain might relent at any moment. Yet with every passing hour, resignation settled in, and with resignation came acceptance. They would not be leaving soon. Instead, they leaned into the stillness, into the space where conversation flowed more freely than it had at the beginning. There was no urgency to fill the silences, for even those had grown comfortable. He no longer felt compelled to explain himself, nor did she feel the need to guard her thoughts. They spoke when words came, and when they did not, the quiet between them was gentle, almost companionable. It was in these pauses that the promise took root, not spoken aloud, but felt in the very air. A shared glance carried more weight than any declaration, as though they both understood that something was being written between them, line by line, in ways too delicate for language. A storm had trapped them, yes, but it had also removed the world's demands, leaving only the two of them, unhurried, unguarded, and strangely bound. He found himself imagining what it would be like to see her again once the skies cleared, to hear her laughter not against the backdrop of thunder but in the light of day. She wondered, quietly, if the connection they had discovered in this strange refuge might survive beyond it, if his kindness and steady warmth would feel the same when the storm no longer pressed them so close. Neither spoke these thoughts, yet both carried them, and in that unspoken carrying was the silent promise. Their words, when they came, revealed it too, though indirectly. He spoke of roads he still wished to travel, and she listened as though she might walk them in his stories. She described the gardens she loved, the books that kept her company, and he found himself picturing her there, her presence adding life to the scenes she painted. Each story was an offering, and each acceptance was a quiet agreement that they wished to know more, not less, of one another. The storm outside seemed endless, but within, time no longer felt burdensome. They were content to remain, as though the night itself had conspired to keep them in each other's company a little longer. The air between them grew warmer, not from the space itself, but from the trust that had been built, the admiration already felt, and the gentle anticipation of what might follow. It was not a promise sealed with words, nor with any outward gesture. It was far more subtle than that, more enduring because of its quietness. It lived in the way he noticed her ease when he smiled, in the way she leaned slightly closer when the thunder grew loud, in the way neither seemed eager for the storm to end, though its end would mean freedom. A bond had been formed, and it was strong enough to be felt without being named. The rain continued to fall, the wind continued to howl, but the shelter had become something different now, not merely a refuge from the weather, but the birthplace of possibility. And though the night might have begun with fear and uncertainty, it was now heavy with a promise that neither had spoken yet both had understood, that this meeting was not meant to vanish with the storm. And that was the beginning of their hope. At last the storm began to break. It was not sudden, as one might expect from such a fierce display of nature, but rather gradual, as though the heavens themselves were reluctant to let go of their power. The rain, once violent and unyielding, softened into a steady patter. The thunder, which had shaken the very ground beneath them, now rumbled distantly, like a voice that had grown tired from shouting. The lightning, once blinding, grew faint and rare, until the sky was more shadow than flame. With the storm's retreat came a stillness, the kind that carries both relief and sorrow, for they knew the night that had bound them together was reaching its end. She was the first to notice the quiet, her eyes lifting toward the doorway where the storm had raged for so many hours. The street, though slick with rain, no longer shimmered under constant strikes of light. The air smelled fresh, cleansed, as though the world had been washed of all its unrest. She drew a slow breath, as though tasting the calm, but she did not step away. Instead, she lingered, her gaze returning to him, unwilling to let the silence between them become farewell. He felt the same hesitation. Freedom from the storm should have brought eagerness, yet there was none. He looked at her, at the way the faint glow of the night softened her features, and knew that something within him had shifted. The storm had kept them together, but it was not merely weather that had drawn their closeness. It was something deeper, something that had grown in the hours they had shared. And as the skies cleared, his heart seemed clearer as well, no longer clouded by weariness or restlessness. They spoke less now, for words seemed almost too heavy, too clumsy for the delicacy of the moment. Yet what silence offered was not distance but intimacy, for their thoughts moved in harmony, unspoken but deeply felt. Every glance carried meaning, every pause carried weight. It was as though the storm had stripped away all pretenses, leaving only truth between them, She thought of how easily she had spoken to him, how naturally her stories had flowed, how he had listened without judgment. She thought of how his steadiness had calmed her fear, how his laughter had softened the thunder, how his kindness had felt like a light against the darkness, and in those thoughts lived a tenderness she could not deny. He thought of her courage, the quiet grace with which she had faced the storm. He thought of her honesty, her dreams, her vulnerability, all of which had revealed not weakness but strength more enduring than any he had known. And in those reflections lived an admiration that had already deepened into something more. The storm had ended, yet neither wished to end what the storm had begun. They knew that the night had given them something rare, something not easily explained. There was no need to name it, for it lived in their eyes, in the closeness that lingered, in the way neither stepped toward the street, though the rain had ceased. The world outside was waiting, yet in that moment, the only world that mattered was the one they had built in the shelter of the storm. It was a night that would not be forgotten, not because of the rain or the thunder, but because of what had taken root in its midst. They had entered as strangers, seeking nothing more than refuge, but they would leave with hearts that had been altered, shaped by an encounter that felt both sudden and inevitable. And though no promises had been spoken, the promise was there all the same, quiet but strong, waiting for the days to come. The storm had cleared the skies, and it had cleared their hearts as well. What began in fear had grown into comfort. What began in chance had grown into connection, and what began in darkness had given way to the possibility of light. And that was the beginning of their forever. Thank you for joining me on this stormy night's journey of love and hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel for more beautiful English stories told in this style. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, may every storm in your life lead to a new beginning.